Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Krame Center for Mindful Living. I see some familiar faces and then I see a lot of new faces. So welcome, and let me just take a moment to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We're a not-for-profit 501c3, and our mission is to help people reduce their stress, become more resilient, and live better lives. And that's through the programs we offer, which are all grounded in mindfulness, positive psychology, and self-compassion. So please take a moment at your leisure to visit our website for more information and the programs that we offer. And that is thecramecenter.org. And of course, also follow us on social media. So before I introduce our guests this afternoon, I'd like to go over just a couple of technical details about how we will conduct questions or discussions. And so when you're prompted at the end, near the end, and our guest will indicate when the time is right for questions and answers, you can either do it, there's two ways that you can participate, either raising your digital hand, and then we will call upon you to unmute yourself. And to raise a digital hand, you can take a moment now to locate the participant icon with the two little heads on the bottom toolbar. And when you click on that, it opens a sidebar where on the bottom right, it says raise hand. And you just click that, and in the order that the hands come up, we will answer. Or if you prefer, you can write into the chat box by clicking on the chat on the bottom toolbar, and that will open the chat window and you can type. So our guest this evening is a very special, talented woman, Valerie Brown, founder and principal of Lead Smart Coaching. And Valerie has a really interesting story. She transformed her high-pressure, high-stakes 20-year career as a lawyer lobbyist representing educational institutions and nonprofits to human-scale work with diverse leaders and teams to foster trustworthy, compassionate, and authentic connections. So by connecting leadership and mindfulness, Valerie went from being a type A lawyer lobbyist to a Dharma teacher. She began studying mindfulness with Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh in 1995 and went on to become an ordained Dharma teacher in the Plum Village tradition. She holds a Juris Doctorate, Master of Arts, and Bachelor of Arts, and is also licensed to practice law in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. She's a court-trained mediator, and her training from lawyer lobbyist to mindfulness practitioner was extensive, and I can't even begin to mention all of the accreditations that she has, but it includes work with the Center for Courage and Renewal and educator activist Parker J. Palmer, the Institute for Transformational Leadership at Georgetown University, and the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society. And she's also an accredited leadership coach at the professional certified coach level. So you can learn more about Valerie, who's also an international retreat leader, writer, and chief mindfulness officer and professional pilgrim of Lead Smart Coaching. You can learn more about her and her work at leadsmartcoaching.com. So without any further ado, I would just like to say we are thrilled, and it is my pleasure to introduce Valerie Brown. Welcome, Valerie. So Valerie, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. All right, well, thank you, Catherine. What a beautiful introduction. I hope I live up to that. I also want to just thank the Krame Center for having me here. And just say, as I looked on the screen, I see so many faces of people that I know and love. And just a big shout out and a big hug to you all. And to the new people, just welcome and thank you for being here. So the focus for about the next 60 minutes, super short, is on cultivating mindfulness through the practice of deep listening. So here we're really looking at how we can use this practice of listening to form more authentic, genuine, connections, especially now in this time of societal change and flux. So our roadmap for this session is we'll begin with some centering practices. We'll take just a tiny bit of time to center ourselves with the breath. And then I'll share with you some of what I have learned the hard way on deep listening practices. These teachings come from the Plum Village community and Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And then we'll have some time in breakout rooms, and super, super short. And we'll come out of the breakout rooms and we'll engage in a Q&A. So that's the roadmap. So beginning with a centering moment. So Sarah, could you place that first slide up, please? So you are looking, friends, at the very heart of my home. This is the center of my home, my kitchen, and this is an ofrenda. An ofrenda is an altar to the living and to the dead. It's a way of recognizing and pausing and acknowledging the people and the lives who have touched us. So on my ofrenda are the ancestors, bits and objects and pieces that represent the ancestors, as well as the descendants. So more than 120,000 people have lost their lives due to COVID-19. Millions of people have been displaced from work. We are dealing with the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and many, many others that have erupted into nationwide protest about the disparate treatment of Black people in particular. So I'd like us to just pause for a moment and take in the ofrenda. And pause for a moment and recall your own ancestors, the people who have supported and touched you, that have made it possible for you to be here. And silently to yourself, say the name of that person. Thank you. So the next slide, Sarah, please. This is also a time to acknowledge the land on which we are situated as a way of honoring and respecting the sovereignty of people and our relationship to the land itself. And so again, as a centering moment, I'd invite you to pause, take note of the land on which you are situated and the people, the ancestors who have inhabited this land. And again, silently to yourself, say the name. Say the name of the land, say the name of the people. Thank you. And let's go to gallery view. Go back to gallery view for just a moment. Thank you. So we each came here for a particular reason. I'd like to invite you to take the next maybe 30 seconds to think about what is it that you said yes to when you registered for this session? What did you say yes to? take the next 30 seconds and just jot a note to yourself. Maybe allow that to wash over you. What did you say yes to? And again, say that silently to yourself. What is it that brought you here? What did you say yes to? And finally, a kind of an approach to this time together. Sarah, could you put that next slide up, please? So I'd like to offer this as an approach. The Chinese character for the word listening, as you can see, has many parts and complexities. So first of all, I want to acknowledge and a kind of cultural humility. Whenever I speak about other people's culture, there's much I don't know, but I'm learning. And I'd like to share this symbol of listening. So we listen, at least according to the Chinese people, on many different levels. We listen not only with the ears to hear, but with the heart to feel, with the eyes to see, with the mind to think, and with a kind of undivided attention. And so this is the kind of listening, the complexity of listening that I'm really referring to. And then I think we have one additional slide. Sarah, please. Yes. So when I think of the practice of listening in this very deep way, with the heart and the mind and the eyes, I get this visual image of this very clear and calm lake, kind of reflecting everything, still, a sense of presence. That's what I mean about listening. So let us return to gallery view, please. So I'd like to share with you a tiny bit about my own personal journey in reflecting on listening. So I didn't go to law school to be a Dharma teacher. You know, my motivations to go to law school were pretty crass, I have to say. It was about making money and getting out of Brooklyn. Even saying those words feels pretty crass, but that's where I was at. And that was largely motivated by a lot of fear and running and poverty and the violence. And so I decided to become a lawyer, to become not just a lawyer, but a lobbyist, someone who wields and deals in power and influence. I actually became a lawyer before I knew who I was. But I had some real watershed moments. And one was, sadly, I have to say, and I do not recommend it, but sadly, I had a divorce. And it was my husband, Andy, who said, "You know, Valerie, you don't listen to me." And you know, the guy was right. The big shot lawyer, I had the answer before he even asked the question. And I've been on this journey of learning how to listen ever since. So one of those watershed moments was many years ago in 1995. I was lucky enough to attend a public talk given by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. At the time, I was fairly clueless. I'm not even sure I knew who Thich Nhat Hanh was. And he was talking about peace and love and harmony and how to listen and all this stuff. And I walked out this Dharma talk with hundreds of people. And I thought to myself, that guy's nuts. You know, here it is, this great Zen master. And I thought he was the crazy person. So again, I've been on this learning journey, and there's something about, you know, we teach what we need to learn the most. So I'm definitely in this camp of learning. So I'd like to share what I learned over these 25 years in the next, how long? The next few minutes from Thich Nhat Hanh, as well as some of the research. You know, as a lawyer, kind of this, I've got this analytical brain, so forgive me. So a little bit of the research, and then a little bit of the practice of mindfulness. So let's go to the research first, and we'll get to questions. So we know that about 7% of how we convey information is by words. Wow, take that in. 7% of what we actually convey is by words. 38% is by the tone, the tonality of our voice. And 55% is the meaning that we transmit non-verbally. So a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4, there was a really cool study by Google. It made the front page of the New York Times Magazine, and some of you might have seen it. It was a wonderful study by the Canadian researcher, Dr. Amy Edmondson. You can check out her work. She's fabulous. And so she did this study of Google employees. And what they found out, Google wanted to know, how do we make the highest performing teams, you know? And so Edmondson did all this research, and what she found out was the capacity to take turns while listening was an amazing predictor of how well the team would actually do. And what she really found out was this capacity to listen in this sensitive way predicted a kind of social sensitivity, a fundamental component of emotional intelligence, and pointing to communication competency. And despite that research and research before that, according to the International Listening Association, and there is such a thing, only 2% of all workers, 2% of all workers actually have training in listening. So that's the tiny bit of research. There's a lot more, but that's what I have for right now. So let's turn to mindfulness, kind of as a component of all of this. And what's coming to me kind of just spontaneously is taking a moment to just pause and breathe, you know, with just the research alone. So mindfulness and listening, how do they connect? So Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh had a very good friend, and his name was Paul Tillich. Tillich was a well-known theologian, and Tillich was famous for saying, the first duty of love is to listen. the first duty of love is to listen. So we know that listening is so close to being loved, being cared for, being seen, that most people can't distinguish. To be held in that warm embrace of attentiveness, where we do not have an agenda. We are holding space for something to emerge. And there is a kind of quality of tension, and yet this is also a highly generative space. So we're holding space for what is expressed and what is unexpressed, knowing again that so much of communication is nonverbal. From a mindfulness perspective, we listen without the need for rebuttal, but for connection. We listen not for disagreement, but for understanding. Now I can say that this took me a very long time to understand that. Krishnamurti also speaks to that. As a lawyer, I was trained to find the errors, to find the holes in the argument and poke through it. But to listen for understanding is a whole different level of listening. In fact, it goes even further than that. We listen to actually relieve the suffering of another person. We listen without an agenda. Even if we think that what the person is saying is totally wrong, 100% wrong, we will have a time at another date, at another time to rebut, to say, hey, remember when you said that? I've got another idea. But when we're listening, we're there solely to relieve the suffering of another person. And when we do that, according to Thich Nhat Hanh and many other teachers, Tilak, Krishnamurti, they all say the same thing, that it actually boomerangs back on us and we benefit. So, Sarah, we have a lovely quote of dear Thich Nhat Hanh that we'd like to share with you. Here's what Thich Nhat Hanh says about listening. So it's deep listening is the kind of listening that helps relieve the suffering of another person. You listen with only one purpose, to help that person to empty their heart. That's it. So let's go back to gallery view. Sarah, thank you. So how do we practice this kind of listening in a time of a global pandemic when there's so much racial injustice and strife? The first thing is never to lose sight of the purpose of why we are listening. We are listening not to persuade others, but to inspire confidence, joy, and hope. That is the purpose of why we're listening. We are not trying to convince the other person that I'm right and you're wrong. Actually, that move of trying to convince the other person, that is way too small for you. Way too small. You're bigger than that. You're way bigger than that. So we need to be in a bigger, much bigger space. And the bigger space is love in action. The bigger space is compassion. The bigger space is forgiveness. The bigger space is love. That's the space. So we have a litmus test, and this comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. A litmus test of when to speak and how to speak. Here's the litmus test, and this is one of dozens. Before you speak, ask yourself this question. Is what I have to say truthful, useful, timely, and compassionate? Is what I have to say truthful, useful, timely, and compassionate? Is it inspiring confidence, joy, and hope? Has the time passed, and am I holding on to something that has been long put down by the other person? Is what I'm about to say and useful now? Is it truthful? So speaking and listening kind of go hand in hand. It's a both and proposition. So let's recap the teachings, okay? First, listening is an act of love. The first duty of love is to listen. Second, we are holding space for something new to emerge. Third, we listen without rebuttal. This might come at some point. We can request a time to share, but we're listening without rebuttal. We do the litmus test in our head before we speak. Is what I'm about to say truthful? Is it useful? Is it timely? Is it compassionate? We run the test. And then we decide what we wish to say. So there you have the teachings of a Zen master over a lifetime on how to listen. We are flowers. We are flowers in the garden of humanity. You cannot open a flower with a sledgehammer. So listening is moving at a human pace. And this is the speed of trust. It's not very fast. So thank you for listening. Much love, much gratitude. So we have lots of time now to go into breakout rooms. And you know, the thing when you're in the Dharma hall is we listen to the Dharma talk. They call it actually Dharma rain. We allow the rain of the Dharma to penetrate. But that's just part A. Part B is we need to put the Dharma into practice. The Dharma meaning the teachings. So I've just shared a lifetime of teaching from this amazing person, Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And now we have a chance to practice. So we were going to do dyads, pairs. And here's the thing, we're going to go into a breakout room and each person will have 3 minutes, not a lifetime, a short time, to share one meaningful moment. Not your whole life story, but something. So one person speaks, the other person listens, and then you switch. And here's the request. My friends, take note. Take note of what it feels like to speak. Take note of what it feels like. Practice listening with the eyes, with the heart, with the attention. Notice what that feels like, friends. So 3 minutes per person, and Sarah will broadcast the message, any message in the dyads. And then we'll come out of the breakout rooms and we will have a time to chat together. So please be sure at the end of your session with your partner to thank the person for their listening. So again, one person speaks, the other listens. You can choose who will go first and who will follow. Very short, one meaningful moment you choose. Sarah.
Okay. Great, thank you, Valerie. So now I'm going to split you into breakout rooms. So you'll receive a prompt on your screen. If you could please just click join, that would be great. It will put you into your respected room. And then I'll send a message about a minute before so that it gives you a little bit of time to know that we're wrapping up. And just please keep in mind that when the breakout room is over, it may be an abrupt end and you'll come back into this meeting. So I'm going to split you up now.
And let me just say that you are in choice. If you don't wish to join a breakout room, no problem. You can stay in the main room and just hang out. Sarah. Okay, so we have some folks in the main room. Great. How are we situated, Sarah? Does everyone have a partner?
I believe so. I'm going through and checking now.
Thank you. I'm going to move because I'm in the sun and to get out of the sun glare.
Perfect.
I'm going to go off camera and on mute.
Perfect. There's still a few people on here who need to click join. So if you receive that message on your screen, please just click on join. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Much appreciated. So now I would like to invite us to go back to what you said yes to when you registered for this session. So take a moment, maybe take out whatever the device was, or maybe it was just an old-fashioned piece of paper and a pen, or cast back in your mind to what is it that you actually said yes to. And let's just take just 1 minute, 60 seconds to pause and to be with that. That is an aspiration. Allow it to have breath and life and wings. Hold on to it. Repeat those words silently to yourself. What is it that you actually said yes to? About listening in a deeper way, listening for understanding. So thank you again. So we have about 15 minutes. The host would like to close, and we need to allot some time for Catherine and Sarah to wrap us up. But so we have about 15 minutes. If anyone has questions, comments that you would like to offer, insights from our time together. And just a word of caution, someone might have in our dyads, pairs, shared something that was personal, and just simply request that we keep that within confidence and speak using I statements. There are tons of guidelines that we could talk about, but for the next 15 minutes to invite those guidelines if we are to speak. You can also, if you have a question, place them in the chat, and Catherine and Sarah will read out your question. You know, in the Plum Village tradition by Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, we say that one question, one good question, benefits many people. So we love your questions. We'll do our best to respond. Questions, insights, observations.
So we have a question from Roberta. Roberta, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself. Roberta, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, dear one. I was just practicing in our dyad, as you shared, Valerie, that deep listening, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, is we listen for what's left unsaid. And I think this is the first time I really listened for what's unsaid, in the sense of just listening, like thinking about this person's life, this person's history. And I'm just realizing what a tool that is in this time of learning about power and privilege and white supremacy and patriarchy, like, wow, what a tool of empowerment. So really, I'm sharing an insight that I just had, and I'm really excited about it. And I would love to hear any thoughts you have about this, sister. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for unmuting me. So a deep bow to my sister, Roberta. I am the one who really should be in the audience, because Roberta is an expert. She has studied for many years with Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication. So a deep bow. Yes, Susan, a deep bow to yet another brilliant teacher. And there's so many of these teachers. And so I began with the ofrenda for a reason. And I won't go into the details of it, but to begin to understand that we bring ourselves and our ancestors to all of our conversations. We have a lineage. We have a listening lineage. We learned how to listen from our ancestors. And then we pass that lineage on to our descendants, our children, and their children. So it's so important. We have a chance to learn and to study and to practice, to recognize that we come with a lineage. And so a deep bow to the people in our lives that taught us how to listen. And we have a chance to learn in a different way. So thank you for that question. Beautiful. It's a beautiful question.
Thank you, Valerie. We have another question. Paula, if you would like to unmute yourself. Paula? If we can unmute Paula. Sarah, can you unmute Paula by any chance?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now we can.
Oh, actually, I think I raised my hand in error. So, because I wanted to see more people. So thank you. But thank you, Sister Valerie. Thank you. Thank you.
Paula is another friend. I stacked the deck with all my friends. But thank you, Paula, for being here. Another
Yes.
brilliant teacher,
Yes.
because immense gratitude
Yes.
for being here. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Valerie, we do have a question. We have two questions in the chat. So from Judy, when you first started, how did you quiet the mind to really listening instead of thinking of a response, for example? And that is from Judy.
Yeah, so what a beautiful question. Like, when you first start, how to quiet the mind. So I think this is really important, and I could give a whole Dharma talk on this. But one of the things that I've experimented with and that I've learned through trial and error is not to wait until conditions are perfect, not to wait until I don't have any thoughts, not to wait until my mind is totally quiet. Because you know what? That's not going to happen. It's not. The nature of the mind is to think and to analyze and to, to engage. And so the practice is not to have no thoughts, because that's not going to happen, but to notice the thought, the nature of the thought, how that thought imprints on a cellular level on your body. Like, is it a thought of being fearful of the police? How does that thought then imprint on the body and the breath that then affects how I show up, how I speak, how I listen, the choices I make, and so forth? So we often kind of self-sabotage ourselves. We don't take the first step because we're waiting for perfection, right? And if I would share anything, it's that we've got this already. You didn't even need this program, this hour-long session, because you're not broken, you've got it, you can do it. And so to begin where you are, as great as it is, whatever it is, to just begin where you are, with the thoughts, with the racing thoughts, with all of it. You know, one of our teachers, and I'm looking at Susan Kaplan, and we've studied for many years with an American Quaker educator by the name of Parker J. Palmer. And he's been an amazing teacher, to say that part of this is we don't wait, we don't sit around waiting, that we take all of that, the stuff that we would rather not have, the stuff that we do have. This is what makes the wholeness of a human being, the depth of a human being, the racing mind, the open heart. It's not like you throw out the racing mind and I only want the open heart. That doesn't exist. We exist with the racing mind. We exist with the open heart. We exist with the despair. We exist with the comfort. We exist with the whole package. And so the challenge is, how do we hold that complexity? And part of it is places like the Krame Center, places like this. These are places that show us the path and the way of how to do this. So I want to thank Catherine and William and the people here at the center who have created such a beautiful offering that show us the way.
Well, thank you for that, Valerie. We have a couple more questions in the chat, if that's all right. Linda is a teacher in Brooklyn, and she's asking about high school special ed student population. How might I introduce this in remote learning? Any thoughts? Especially students do not want to share their faces, their home scene. So that is from Linda in Brooklyn.
So Catherine, I'm going to ask you if you could repeat the question, because a part of it cut out.
Okay, I'm sorry. So as a teacher in Brooklyn, Linda would like to know, she teaches high school special ed. How can she bring this in remote learning to her special ed population, especially when the students do not want to share their faces or their home scene?
Yes. Yeah, so I have some ideas. The first is, as best we can, taking into account the safety of the individual, to leave people in choice, to honor the choices that people make. So you'll notice that one of the prompts was, if you don't wish to go into the breakout room, please stay in the main room. So I think this is hugely important for people who have been marginalized for one reason or another, to offer the person choice. In terms of the showing of the face, again, I would offer choice, and often, we are in a time of tremendous trauma and anxiety, and that cannot be underestimated. And so if I were to say one practice that is hugely helpful at this time, whether the person is in the so-called special education environment or otherwise, is to allow as much choice as possible. So to go back to whomever it is that we are engaging with and ask, what would support you? And as best we can to do that. That may sound like a little thing, but to people who have been marginalized and not ask that basic question, this is very powerful. So I'm aware that we have 2 minutes remaining, and I know that Catherine and maybe William and Sarah have closing remarks. But I also want to thank the Krame Center for this opportunity to share the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh on listening. Everything I've shared with you comes from my 25 years with Thai, and I'm incredibly grateful to him, to the Plum Village community, and to the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese culture that has produced such a person. So thank you. Deep love and gratitude.
Thank you, Valerie. That was beautiful and powerful, and just such a good reminder. I loved when you said, we've got this. It's all here. We just have to remember and tune in. So it was beautiful and such a great reminder. And I came to this, we had just a full disclosure, we had already asked Valerie to speak. And then I just felt this incredible sense of urgency with everything that is happening now. And when Valerie offered this workshop on cultivating mindfulness for deep listening, I was all in. Personally, I wanted to tap into how can I listen more compassionately when there's all this suffering right now. And it really is a time of intense suffering, but if each one of us can do our part and listen deeply, not just to those around us, immediate family members and loved ones, but listen. And I loved the Chinese character that it's full embodied listening, not just listening with the ears, just whole being listening. So I thank you for sharing all of that. It was so insightful, so beautiful. And I do hope that everyone will go on Valerie's website. Sarah's going to put up one last slide that has her website on it, and it also has our website. And we are here, and we are trying to offer an avenue to practice mindfulness, deep listening, compassion. But thank you very much. It was such a beautiful offering. Thank you. So Sarah, if you'd like to put up that last slide. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.